I am delighted, we're all delighted, to be able to welcome Alejo López as our guest speaker. Alejo is a full-time astrologer who lives in Athens. He moved from Argentina, I believe, to Spain, and then on to Athens perhaps a year ago. He holds a degree in psychology and a diploma from the Faculty of Astrological Studies, where he now tutors. And Alejo is currently studying for the MA in Cultural Astronomy and Astrology, and he's also trained to be a Jungian Analyst. Lots. So tonight, he is speaking to us on the fascinating subject of astrocartography, its theory, its practice, and how certain places can affect us, and even act as a sort of mirror for our soul. So thank you so much for accepting our invitation, Alejo, and now over to you.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. I always start with the chart of today to kind of see what the omen is. I hope I've casted it properly because I've been moving time zones for the last month a lot. So I hope I did the right. I'm using your location, not mine. And we see this Jupiter rising, which I think it's a nice omen, and especially because it's in the 4th house, and we're going to be talking about place and the land, if you want to, which is something that I would relate with the 4th house. I use equal houses, you see. I hope it's okay with all of you. And we also see that Venus has just set, so she's conjunct the descendant, and I also thought it's in a very nice omen. She's ruling the midheaven. She's dispositing the moon. So I was like, okay, it's because I'm going to be talking about something that brings me pleasure, and I hope it will give you pleasure as well. So let's see how it goes. So this is a chart, like a regular chart that you have seen a lot of times probably, and this is the astrocartography of that chart. So basically what we do is we cast the chart on a map, and I will go a little bit later on the details on how do we do it and what does this mean. But I just want to bring like a quick idea on the astrocartography to get you start kind of thinking in this way. Basically, we're going to look at the lines, and where a line is going through a place, it has some kind of meaning, right? Right now, I'm in California. I'm somewhere between San Francisco and Sacramento. And you see we have Venus and Neptune. It's closer to Venus, to be honest. Neptune is a bit far. We will see in a bit what it means. I just want to bring in this idea for a moment, just to kind of start placing some seeds. So for the moment, this means that right now at this spot, Venus is important in this area, because this means that Venus is conjunct the midheaven. So Venus is high up in the sky. So for me, which I'm here in California, if I cast the chart here in California, also Venus would be prominent. And I think it's also talking about the possibility of pleasure on doing this session. And above all else, when I looked at this, so this is the same chart that I showed you at the beginning, kind of projected onto the map. This is Athens, where I live. So Uranus is right on the IC on Athens, which would mean a disruption right in your home life. And actually, I should be in Athens. I shouldn't be in California right now. So this was not the plan when I was preparing, when I agreed to do this session. And when I looked at the chart and then at the astrocartography, I saw that this is connecting some way to my experience of what Athens should be now. So I think it's quite interesting. So I wanted to start just with this kind of random thought. And now let's go into the details of what is astrocartography and how to do it. So this is my plan for the day, to talk about what is astrocartography, to tell you how I cast astrocartography maps, how I read them, why we read them in this way, which is basically we give importance to angular planets, and then some case examples. And then if we have time, I would like to talk a little bit about the Parans. I'm not sure if there will be time. I think there will be time, and I would like to talk a little bit about that. So this is just an introduction to applying astrology to place, because there are more techniques you can do. I never like to think of myself as an expert on any field. So this is my exploration. on astrocartography, and hopefully this will encourage you to do your own research and you will explore on your own, and you will find your own conclusions, and maybe they will not agree with some of my ideas, and that's perfectly fine. I'm hoping not to be always right, but to share my thoughts on this. Okay, so first of all, what is astrocartography? So basically, when we cast a chart, we always, when something happens in the world, we're always trying to find out at what time exactly happened, right? When we have a client, we want to know at what time they were born exactly. When you have a relationship that's going on for a while, and you say, okay, I want to cast the synastry now, and they tell you, I don't know, my mom told me between 5 a.m. or midday. You're like, what? No, this is impossible. So basically, we're obsessed with the idea of time, right? But actually, to cast a chart, we also need space. We also need a place. We give it for granted because we always know where events are happening. It's harder to grasp at what time the event exactly happened, but usually we give for granted that it happened in a place, right? But we need both. I have some examples here. I don't know if you remember when Notre Dame got on fire. We were all reading at the newspapers to try to find the exact time that the fire started, right? Then for natal charts, we also do it. We also do it sometimes for mundane astrology to do charts of countries and cities. We want to know at what time they were founded, right? Maybe they got the independence or whatever. So time, we're used to, like, time is our tool, right, in astrology. It's what we do. It's like astrology is a way of measuring time, if you want. We measure cycles and we look at history, and so we're always obsessed with time. And we've learned, I'm sure you've all reflected on this before, we've learned that time has two different qualities, at least. So one is the objective, the homogeneous time, the regular one, that it's precise, that we can count, right? And this is the clock time. This is like, okay, now we're starting the talk today at 7:30, right? So this is like clock time. It's objective. For everybody, it's the same. And we can all agree on what this time is. But then when we do astrology, we know that time is not so objective. When you look at a person's life, we know that time is subjective, that the same time can have different meanings for each person, that the same amount of time can be experienced in different ways. So if you're having a good time, time flies by. If you're having a bad time, instead time is very, very slow, right? So time can also be very, very subjective. Yeah. So for instance, the reason I'm here in the USA is because I have a friend who has become a father, right? So I came to the USA to help him out with the whole thing. And so for some people, this is just June and July of 2022. For me, this is a special time because I'm experiencing something that I have never experienced before, which is being present in a birth, right? So for me, this time is changing. I have a subjective experience of time. And well, we all relate. I mean, I don't know. I relate the objective time to Saturn and the subjective time to the Moon, which makes sense because they're very opposing. In the like, if you go to Hellenistic astrology, they're like very, very, one rules Cancer, the other one rules Saturn. So they're very in the other sides of the cosmos. One is very close to the Earth, the other one is very far. So one is very subjective and the other is very objective, right? Now my question, so we call one Chronos and Keros, right? Now my question has been for a while because I've traveled a lot. So my question has been for a while, if we can apply this same idea to space, if we have an objective space and a subjective space. And this has been something that I've been wondering for a while because I've traveled, I wouldn't say a lot, but I've traveled a lot. And I have found some cities where I arrive and I feel like I'm at home and I could stay there forever. And then I have found some places that I arrive and I instantly feel repelled from those places or feel different kinds of emotions. And sometimes I don't really know those places yet because I've just arrived. And I think sometimes it's like people, like when you meet people, some people you immediately click off, and some people, for some reason, you don't want to see them. I mean, maybe they haven't done anything, but you're just really you don't feel attracted to them. So I started wondering, is there something similar with space? And it makes sense because if time is important to cast an astral chart, space is also important to cast an astral chart. So if time has this quality, maybe space has also this quality. So, as Gillian said, I was doing the MA of Cultural Astronomy and Astrology, and I had Bernadette Brady as one of my teachers, and she's a genius, basically. And in one session, she explained this idea. She explained that, when Aristotle was trying to define space, what he said is basically that each element is compelled to go to its right place. So the quote says, moreover, the trends of the physical elements, fire, earth, and the rest, show not only that locality or position is a reality, but also that it exerts an active influence. So the locality or position, so the place, exerts an active influence. For fire and earth are born, the one upwards and the other one downwards, if unimpeded, each towards its own position. And these terms, up and down, and the rest of the six-dimensional directions, indicate subdivisions or distinct classes of positions or localities in general. So for Aristotle, basically what he's saying is that place has power because it's drawing the elements towards where they should be, towards the right place, where they belong, right? So I started thinking about this when I heard this session about my travels, and I started thinking, why did I choose to go to these places? Maybe it's not because I wanted to go to these places. Maybe something from these places was calling me, was making me move there. So with this idea, place has agency. It can create movement, right? Now what happened? We know that with time, the cosmos got disenchanted, let's say, right? And then we got Galileo Galilei, we got Isaac Newton, who created the new physical laws. And so place stopped having the power of motion, because now motion doesn't depend on a place. It depends on the qualities of the object. It depends on the gravitational pull forces and these kind of things. So then place became neutral. It didn't have any more power, and it became space. And that's how engineering works, right? We go to a place and we want to build something, and if there's a mountain, we throw it down. If there's a tree, we cut it down and we can create a road. Like, place became space and we can do what we want with it. It became a resource. It lost its subjectivity. It's lost its power. So astrocartography, what does, is to go back to the previous idea, to go back to the idea that place has a soul, it has an influence, it has agency, and it depends on your chart, the interaction that you may have with different places. So here I have a quote from Nick Campion. He says, the question that psychological natal astrology has failed to answer, for all its perceived advantages, is why an individual might have an inner experience in one place rather than another. It has tended to ignore the ancient notion that place, space, and direction might possess quality, reveal symbolic significance, or indicate divine intent. So this is the idea of astrocartography. Place can have a divine intent. And so, Roy Firebrace, he started publishing a lot of astrocartography maps from the 1950s. And then it was with Jimmy Lewis, who had access to computers, who started, it was easier to cast these kinds of maps with computers. So he started, he worked with all of his heart to promote this idea. And that's how astrocartography started becoming very, very, very popular, because he had access to computers, of course. So it was a tool he had in order to work with this. So what are the techniques that we can use when we're talking about applying astrology to place and not so much to time, not only to time, I would say. So one of the techniques is astrocartography, which is the one that we're gonna see today. So basically, it's about trying to see which planets are going to be angular in different places according to your chart. The other technique is cyclocartography, which has the same idea, but it's astrocartography in motion. So you would progress and apply the transits to your chart and then see how these transits and progressions are playing out in the world. So maybe this place usually is not significant for you, but you go there in a specific moment, and at that moment, this place becomes significant. Then we have relocation astrology, which is when you relocate the chart of a person. So basically, you keep the same time of birth, the same moment of birth. So you relocate the chart to a different place. So for instance, we started today with the with a chart of today's sessions, placed in the UK, but I'm in California. So I would cast the chart for that same moment when we started the session, but for me it was 11:30 a.m. So I would put 11:30 a.m. instead of 7:30, and I would cast it in Concord, California, which is where I am now. And I would have a new chart. That's location astrology. So when you move, you can do that to see how it's going to play out. And then we have local space astrology, which is you cast, we call it a horizon chart. So basically you look at, it's instead of using the ecliptic as your reference, you use the horizon as your reference. And that will give you a chart of how the planets are moving according to your perspective on Earth, or looking at the horizon. And from there, you can project that movement of the planets throughout the globe, and it will give you another insight. Well, we're not going to see this now because it's a whole new chapter, but just for you to know, these are the techniques that I know. Maybe there are more, but these are the ones that I know. Okay, so how to cast a map? How do we do it? So this is how I do it, and I'm going to use two examples with the software. If you don't have a software, well, I'm going to show you how to do it on astro.com. Also, I always say, if you haven't bought a software yet, you don't need to spend a lot of money on that. You can use astro.com, which will give you a lot of free charts. So you can decide when to invest in a software. So I use Janus usually. If you use Janus, you just this is the chart, let's say, and up here at the top there's a map. You click on the map. Most softwares will be similar. They have a map. You click on the map, and they will give you the astrocartography map. Janus has the option, you go to lines and you can configure. Why is it coming up? Wait. Here. So you can configure which planets you actually want to see. And also you can configure the local space lines, which we're not going to see today, but just for you to know. So Janus has that. Also, Janus has, you can apply orbs. We're going to talk about orbs later. On Janus, you can apply the orbs also, so you can see how the orbs are working. I don't do it because I prefer to do it like more intuitively, but you can do it. And then you can also apply aspects. So you can also see, I'm going to explain now in a minute. When you do the astrocartography map, basically what you're seeing is which planets are angular, right? If you apply aspects, instead of choosing which planets are angular, you're going to choose which planets are creating an aspect to the ascendant or the midheaven in different places. Okay, this is better to use when you're doing relocation astrology, to be honest. I don't use it so much for the astrocartography. But basically it's quite intuitive. So if you have it, you go to the map and it comes out. It comes up. If you don't have a software, astro.com, you just you go to now they've changed, a few months ago, they've changed the webpage. You go to these three little lines, which will give you the option of choosing all horoscopes at a glance. You have to create a user. You can go as a guest user. You can create, if you create a profile, you have, I think, like 100 charts to save for free. Then you choose extended chart selection. And then you go to special. You're going to have all of these options. You go to special. And when you click on that, it's going to give you the Astro map. So you can also, you don't have to invest in the software. If you want to work with this and you want to research a little bit, you can use astro.com, okay? Because sometimes softwares are a bit expensive. So depending on where you are at, what you can do. And then the other one is SolarFire, because I know a lot of people have SolarFire. So it's quite similar to Janus, basically. SolarFire has a map. I don't use it this much. Okay, here it is. It has a globe on top. And if you click on that one, it's going to give you the same map. It has a different kind of colors, but it's the same idea, okay? So basically with any software, you can do it. Okay. Now the question is, what do we do with this? What do we do with this map? So how do we read the astrocartography map? Okay, so this is the chart of Ernesto Che Guevara, and I have clicked on the map, and it comes up as this. Yes. So each one of these lines, what it means is that that planet was angular at that time of birth. So basically what we do is we say, okay, Ernesto Che Guevara was born on the 14th of May, 1928 at 3:05 in the morning in Rosario, Argentina. My question is, at that very same moment, which planets were angular in different places on Earth, right? So the idea is, instead of moving time, which is something that we usually do with astrology, what we're going to do is move space. We're going to change space and not time. So we keep the same moment, 3:05 a.m. in Rosario, but we look at that exact moment in different places on Earth, which planets were angular. And that's what these lines are telling us. Basically, in this map, for instance, here we have Neptune, and underneath there's a little eye, right? So that means that at this time, Neptune, all over this line, was conjunct the IC. So no matter where you're born, if you were born along this line, you had Neptune on the IC. Okay, so all of the straight lines that you see that are going from north to south, and that are straight lines, basically they are telling you which planets are conjunct the midheaven or the IC at the same time, at the same moment. So maybe the time, maybe the local time is going to be different, but the moment is the same moment, right? Like right now here it's what time is it here? It's 11:52. For you, I guess it's 7:52. So it's the same moment, even though it's a different local time. So at this moment, which planets are angular all over the globe? This is the idea. So with the straight lines, we see which planets are either on the midheaven or the IC. And with the curvy lines, we see which planets are either on the ascendant or the descendant. Yeah, so for instance, I have here the sun, and it says T, so it means that all over this line that goes up, the sun was on the descendant. So if you're born at this time, at the time we started our session, if you're born at the time you started that session, any place that is touching this line, your sun is going to be on the descendant. It's going to be conjunct the descendant. So again, so here it's Neptune on the IC. So all over this line, Neptune is going to be on the IC. No matter where you're born, I mean, in the middle of the ocean. I should have chosen a different. Let's say this one, Saturn on the IC. If you're born all over this line, so mid of Brazil and part of Uruguay, you have Saturn on the IC, right? And then here's the Sun on the descendant. So if you're born any part of this line, the Sun was on the descendant. So if we look for the people who were born at the time we started the session, in any part of those lines, Sun is going to be on the descendant. Is this okay? Is that a question? This is the kind of basic idea, and it's very important. Is it clear? Okay. So when you look at the straight lines, it's quite easy because you can see I see all this, and MC is the whole line, right? When you look at the curvy lines, it's complicated because here you have ascendant and here you have descendant. So basically, from this side onwards, it's going to be close to the ascendant, and from this side onwards, it's going to be close to the descendant, okay? And if you think about it, it makes sense. So here people are at midday, right? Sun conjunct the midheaven. And for these people that are here, the day is starting, right? That's why I shaded out the night. So the day is starting. So it makes sense that the sun is on the ascendant. Instead, for people that are here, the sun is moving. So actually, the day is ending. So it makes sense that the sun is on the descendant. It's the opposite case when the curvy line crosses the IC. So here you have the curvy line crosses the IC, right? So these are the ones who are at midday, the one with the sun on the midheaven. And for people here, the day is actually ending, right? And instead for people here, the day is beginning, okay? And it makes sense. So the sun is conjunct the descendant, so the day is ending. And here the sun is conjunct the ascendant, so the day is starting, right? So if you get confused, just remember this. When the curvy line crosses the midheaven, yes, the western part is rising and the eastern part is setting. And when it crosses the IC, it's the other way around, okay? And if you're confused, just follow the line and you will see that it changes when it goes to the other side, okay? But this is kind of the basic idea.
Can I just clarify for a moment something, Alejo? We
Yes.
have had a query. Um, where does the chart of Che come in? And I think that the charts that you've been showing are for the moment of his birth. Is that correct?
So yeah, well, no, sorry, these two are for the session.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So these two are for the session that we started today.
Yes, I beg
7th of
pardon.
July. Well, these are different charts. So because I wanted to show you examples, right? So let me go back. So this is the chart of Che, and we will go back to this chart for a minute. This is the chart of the session.
Thank you.
I think. Does it make sense? Yes, it makes sense because for you the sun is setting. And
Yes.
this one, no, this is the chart for the session, sorry. This is the chart for the session because your sun is setting, exactly. And this one is another chart that I found that I had in my records. That's why I didn't put it. So that you had an example of the line, the curvy line crossing the midheaven.
Thank you.
Okay, because on this one, on the moment that we're now, it doesn't get to cross it. It crosses the IC. But I wanted you to see both examples, so I had to take another chart.
Thank you.
Okay, but basically, sorry if it was confusing. Basically, the idea is that, let's go back to the map. Basically, the idea is that at the time of, at the same moment of birth, in different places, different planets are angular because different planets are either rising, culminating, or setting, right? So our idea is to see at the same moment in which places the planets are angular, which planets are angular. Yeah, this is the basic idea. And why do we care about planets being angular? Well, Robert Hunt here says that astrologers have long noted that a planet near one of the horoscope's angles manifests with great strength. Gockeling's work, plus the work of John Addy and others, indicates that a planet becomes particularly strong 4 times a day, when or just after it rises, culminates, sets, and anti-culminates. The peaks at rising and culmination or near the ascendant and midheaven seem stronger than those at setting and anti-culmination. So basically what Robert Hunt is saying is planets that are angular have power. They're important. And this is I think it's a very old idea in astrology, also like in Hellenistic astrology, they have a similar idea. Like planets that are angular are powerful. That's what we want to see, which planets are angular. So when a planet becomes angular, we believe that it will become prominent. So you have your chart, and you can look in which places on Earth some planets that may be ill positioned, as the astrologer may say, will become prominent, will become powerful, so that you will give them the chance to express themselves more strongly. This is the idea. So, for instance, if you want to shine and succeed, you might think, okay, let me go to a place where my sun is rising or where my sun is at the midheaven, so everybody will see what I do, right? If you want to find love, you might think, okay, maybe it's because I'm in this place. Maybe I should move to another place where people have similar values to mine, and so I will go to the Venus line and I will find love. Maybe you won't find love, but you will find pleasant experiences, right? The moon could tell you where you feel at home, for instance. Now, my personal experience is that you cannot defeat your chart. I don't know how to say it. Like, you have your chart, and no matter where you move, you make a planet prominent, but the seed that was planted when you first took your first independent breath is the same. So I have here an example. This is an artist who lives in Barcelona, and he was saying, I'm fed up of not making enough money. I want to make more money. So he told me he knows some astrology. So he basically came and said, tell me where to go so that my Jupiter is active. So we were looking at Jupiter, and Jupiter falls on the ascendant here. So this is the map, right? So this is his chart this is his chart on the left, and on the right, we have the map. So this means that, let's say, all over this line, all over close to Madrid and the UK, the sun will go to the midheaven. The sun is quite close to the midheaven. So let's choose another one. Mars, for instance, all over this line, yes, if he moves to any of these places, to Moscow and these places, Mars will go all the way to the ascendant, right? So this means that when he was born, at the moment he was born, in these places, Mars was rising. That's what it means. So if he goes there, he activates that Mars. So basically he was saying, let's see where Jupiter is. So he was, oh, I need to move to all of these places in Eastern Europe. And he was like super convinced for a moment. I told him, I looked at his chart and I saw that Jupiter is in Virgo. And I don't know, my idea is that with Jupiter in Virgo, you will find expansion, but it's not going to be an explosive Sagittarian, effortlessly expansion. It's going to have to, there's going to be work behind it, and it's going to be slow, probably. So basically, the session, instead of encouraging him to have the courage to go to this place, I mean, if he wants to go, he can go. But my session was finally more focused on the idea of what is growth for him, what is abundance for him, and how to develop that, instead of believing there's a magic solution. Oh, I just go to Jupiter, to my Jupiter line, and it's going to work. Why? Because his Jupiter is in Virgo, and if he goes here, his Jupiter is still going to be in Virgo, because because it's the same moment in time. What changes are the angularity of the planets, but not the position in the signs. So I would say, actually, I think you're going to be more stressed with the idea that you have to, because it's going to be, what's going to be emphasized is the Jupiter in Libra, in Virgo, that your expansion is slow, is you need to take care of it. It's not going to happen from one day to the other. It demands effort, it demands work, it demands being patient. So actually, I think it's gonna be brought to the limelight. So I think it's actually gonna be tougher even for you if you go there. And actually, I think there's a lot of possibilities. It's gonna be able to make profit with the North Node there, Mars in Leo there. I think it's something that could happen. His son is the ruler of the second house, so I think it could happen. But I think it requires some inner work that he has to do. So this is my idea, that no matter where you go, you take the chart with you. Here we have the case of Che Guevara that I was showing you before. So here's the astrocartography, and I'm going to zoom in to Central America, Latin America. So basically, this is his chart, and this means that in Cuba, when he was born, Saturn was in the midheaven, and the moon was on the ascendant. So this is when he was born, right? So if you look at his chart, right, the moon here is in the 12th in Pisces, and Saturn here is in Sagittarius in the 9th, right? So how do I interpret this? Well, my idea is that when he goes to Cuba, Saturn becomes on the midheaven. What would you say of somebody? The way I think I always, when I have to explain this, is what would you say if somebody has Saturn on the midheaven? Well, probably you would say there might be a sense of frustration, perhaps, or work, but also there might be a sense that after work you can become a total authority on that field. People will see you. This is the guy who knows what needs to be done. This is the guy who has authority, who has stability, who has the stamina to do things. And it's in Sagittarius, so it could be an ideological kind of authority, right? And then what would you say with the moon on next to the ascendant? This is a person who comes into the room and they hug. People feel like, this is mommy. This person will protect me. This person will feed me, will nurture me, right? So my idea would be, well, in Cuba, when he goes to Cuba, here, Saturn on the midheaven and moon on the ascendant, it's his moon and it's his Saturn, and his moon is in the Pisces and originally in the 12th house. So there's this flavor of being super open, right? Being super receptive. So he can immediately kind of merge with the feelings of the area, and he can become an authority through hard work. Probably it wasn't from one day to the other. Probably he had to work and he had to become an authority. Whether this was good or bad, whether you agree with what he did or not, it's not what we're asking, right? As astrologers, we try not to make these questions, just to describe what the person might feel. And I would say that with this astrocartography, I'm not surprised that he felt that he needed to protect because from there he grew, you know, this idea of the moon in Pisces, this spirit, he grew the idea, not only he needed to protect the people from Cuba, he felt he needed to protect the whole Latin America. He grew, right? He wanted to make a whole union and all of that. And he became an authority in order to do that, right? So this shadow that you see next to the lines, I wanted to show you. I don't usually use it, but I wanted to show you. This is the orbs of the planet. So how far from the ascendant can we go to say that Uranus is on the ascendant, let's say? So there are different rules. The general rule is that we use 1 degree. Now, because the Earth is spherical, it's not in a plane, even though we see it. 1 degree at the equator is not the same than 1 degree as you go farther up, farther north, or farther south, right? And that's why I don't use the orbs. I use more like my intuition when I'm looking at the place, and I try to see how do I feel, if it's too far or if it's close, or how do I feel it. So what happens when a planet goes to the ascendant? Well, we expect to apply the idea of the ascendant, right? So a planet will show itself in your outer personality. People around you will identify you with that planet, and you might feel that you are personifying that planet. Sometimes at first you don't realize when you're at that place, but then after a while you realize that people are looking at you like if you were that planet, right? So for instance, if the sun goes to the, I'm choosing one example. If the sun goes to the ascendant line, Jim Lewis says you will embody the sun. You will be assigned the role of a guru by admiring friends. Maybe you become a leader. You will have audacity. You'll be courageous. There's this nobility of character. You are basically attempting to discover who you are. So I think we always need to go back. So of course, Jim Lewis is writing a book, and he cannot put all of the, he cannot go. It's a book, right? So he's giving you some ideas. I think we always need to go back to the chart, right? He's saying if the sun goes in the ascendant, you become the sun. So you will have the courage, you will have the possibility to express that, but of course, you will also have the possibility to ask yourself who you are, right? And who you want to show into the world. And always go back to your original chart to see who that might be. You cannot change your chart. You're born when you're born, right? The descendant, of course, if a planet moves to the descendant, we expect it to be expressed outside. So probably the people we meet will play it for us, or perhaps sometimes the situations we meet that we feel that they are out of our control will express that planet, right? So for instance, if we have Mercury in the descendant, Jim Lewis says your mind and your knowledge expand from being stimulated by the people and ideas you encounter under this line. Flexibility and a more liberal outlook result from meeting with potential teachers, guides, or intellectual mentors. So this zone is excellent for education, teaching, or any other academic pursuit. So maybe it's a good idea if you want to learn something, instead of teach something, you put Mercury on the descendant and you go to that place. And then if you go back to your Mercury, natal Mercury, you're going to see how that experience of learning is going to be, and what you might be interested in learning in that place, and these kinds of things, right? Because you still have your own chart. Then with the midheaven, well, if the planet is in the midheaven, we know it will manifest in the role that you take in society, right? In your position in society, what you do in society. So for instance, Saturn midheaven here, with the case of Che Guevara, you will express Saturn by your social status. Your relationship with society, authority, and your career become paramount at this location, as your urges needs to seek power and control of some sort are directed outward. And probably this might have happened to Che Guevara when he was in Cuba. And then the last angular position is the IC. So this is the foundation. So this is kind of your inner world, your home, what makes you feel safe, what makes you feel that you're okay. So it says the IC represents the foundation with which you are equipped when you come into this world, or the particular individualized context into which you emerge when you are born. Your family, your ethnicity, your race, your social class, your religion. And my PowerPoint automatically changed it to religión, which is Spanish. A planet on that line indicates a change of that context into something else. So for instance, if you have Venus on the IC, Venus takes you home, right? So this position of Venus in this location stresses the enjoyment and perfection of a nurturing home atmosphere, either in actual external terms or perhaps making you feel more at home with yourself, at peace with who you are and where you came from. So maybe you go to your Venus line and you stay there for a few years, and actually, because you're feeling at home there, you can reflect on your original IC, your original place of birth, and then you can, when you go back, you can appreciate it more. So this is the idea. It will always have an impact on your original chart, on who you are originally. So let's see some case examples. So this is one of the case examples I have, is the chart of Luz. She was born in Buenos Aires in Argentina in 1976. This is a great example because she traveled a lot. So her father was a businessman and he had to travel a lot. Not her father, her foster father. So she would move with them. So at the age of 9, she moved from Argentina to Rome with her recently divorced mother and her foster father. When she was 13, they moved to Milano, then they moved to Madrid, then she went back to Argentina for a few months. She went to Philadelphia, where now her mother was living. Then she went back to Madrid, she went to Barcelona, to Lisbon, so she moved a lot. So she was a perfect example to see how this plays out. So this is her chart. So have a little look at her chart. She's Moon in Leo, Sun in Leo, Scorpio rising, with this strong Uranus conjunct the ascendant. And I say strong because it's conjunct the ascendant already in her chart. And then we have Pluto here in Libra in the 12th house. Yes. Chiron is also angular in her natal place. Chiron is conjunct the descendant. Okay. So you have all of these planets in Leo and the Scorpio rising. You can imagine she's quite a strong personality. She has a strong personality. She doesn't come up like a sweet, vulnerable person when you first meet her, of course. And so this is the kind of, well, just to have an idea of who she is. So this is her astrocartography, again, which means that at the same moment when she was born, these planets in these places were angular. So let's look at one of the places she traveled to. When she was 13, they moved to Milan here. And this is the Neptune line that goes to the ascendant. So Neptune originally here is in the 2nd house. But when she moves to Milan, this is Neptune on the ascendant. Here's Milan. And Neptune here is in the 2nd house. So when she goes to Milan, Neptune becomes angular for her, okay? So what would you say of somebody with Neptune on the ascendant? So sometimes we come up with these ideas like, oh, probably she has a sensitive approach to life, so she's going to have a spiritual insight, or she's going to have some kind of compassionate approach. She was 13, you know, when people are very young, you're never sure how this is going to be played out because they're not so in charge of their destiny. I don't know when we ever are, but when you're grown up, maybe you're a little bit more in charge. So you never know how it's going to feel. But usually when I ask this question, people come up with these ideas that it's this is spiritual enlightenment experience. Her experience was dreadful in Milan. She said, I would look, which is a very Neptune experience, you're going to see. She said, I would look at myself in the mirror and I wouldn't recognize who I am, which is, I think, something very much of Neptune on the ascendant. Like, I don't know who I am. Who is it that I see in the mirror, right? Interestingly enough, her Neptune natally is in the 2nd house. And she started having a lot of health eating problems. She didn't like the way she looked. So she had a lot of problems with food. She wouldn't eat because she wanted to be thinner. Then she would eat a lot, and she had this kind of disruptions, let's say. And so for her, these were the worst years of her life, you know. And I think this is interesting because when we first look at Neptune on the ascendant, I think we all think, oh, how wonderful it must have felt. You're also open to what other people, to other people, to other people's hearts and stuff. And for her, it was a very challenging period because she felt judged. She felt she didn't recognize herself. She felt she was dissolving herself. She said that she felt that she didn't have her own personality, and she was struggling with her body. So I think it makes a lot of sense when we look at the astrocartography, and I think it's a good warning sign Again, when we only see at the positive aspect of a planet becoming angular, right? We all want to go to our sun on the midheaven. Well, it could be a great thing, but there might also be downs to that, to being on the limelight all the time, right? And this is with Neptune. So yeah, maybe she was very sensitive and very open to her outer world, but this brought a lot of problems for her. Then she moved to, well, time passed by, right? We move forward in time, and we go to when she was 25, around 25. She was living in Madrid back then. She went to Argentina for a few months, and before going back to Madrid, she went to visit her mom in Philadelphia. And here's Pluto on the ascendant. Okay, so Pluto on the ascendant. When she was born on Philadelphia, Pluto was rising. Pluto's natally on her 12th house. So I imagine when Pluto from the 12th goes to the ascendant, is bringing out a lot of dark, hidden, unconscious issues that may be quite fearful and terrifying. Well, she entered a strong struggle with her mother because her history was tough. Like her mother divorced her father, and she married another man, and from then on she started traveling around the world. She felt a bit like she was taken away from her origin in Argentina. So she was like, all of these feelings started coming up when she was here in Philadelphia with her mother. They started struggling, and she said that at some point, they were starting like fighting, like dishes flying over the place, breaking against the wall. And at some point, she was like, she saw herself almost about to grab a knife to threaten her mom to stay away. And it was like, for her, it was a shock, that she could have this this drive to do this. Of course, she didn't do anything, she realized at the moment, but it was quite a scary experience. And when we were talking about it, it was quite interesting for me to see that Pluto from the 12th moved to the ascendant. So it's bringing up a lot of things that were hidden, that maybe were under control, but in this place, they came out. They came out. And probably if you look at the transits and everything, there's more things going on. It's not just this, of course. But for the moment, we're focusing on the astrocartography. Sorry, what's this? Okay, so let's see another example. This is Giovanni. Giovanni was born in Marsala in Sicily, and well, he also traveled to different places, so it's a good candidate to look at the astrocartography. In the summer of 2004, when he was 25, he moved to Tenerife for a few months, and he said that this was a journey of his life. It was only a few months, but he says it was the most important journey he did. Look, he lived then in Milan, in Venezia, in Tunisia, in Venice, in Montpellier, in Barcelona, in Granada, in Istanbul, in Izmir. So he lived in many places. And from all of these places, when I asked him what was the one trip that was life-changing, he said the months that I was in Tenerife. So I said, okay, let's look at that. So here's his astrocartography. And we're going to zoom into the Canary Islands. So I don't know if you know, the Canary Islands are some islands that are next to Africa, but they belong to Spain. So they speak Spanish there. And so you see, he was in Tenerife, so he was here. So if we're strict, the orb of Saturn doesn't make it, right? But to me, I feel like if it was so important, it was not just the moon, probably it was also Saturn there. So we talked about what his experience was in Tenerife. You see, his Taurus, his sun in Taurus, his Cancer rising, and the moon in Virgo here, quite close to Saturn, right? So when the moon becomes angular, probably Saturn will also become angular because they are very tied to each other, right? So they will go together to become angular. So in Tenerife, he fell in love for the first time, He had been with many women, but never have felt an emotional connection. And in Tenerife, he was living he had a roommate, and he fell in love with her. And they started having what he called family life. Like they were started sharing the days of everyday life, waking up together and having breakfast and deciding what to do during the day together. And for him, this was a life-changing experience. This was like, this is when I changed, when I realized what it is to love, when I realized what it is to have a partner, when I realized what it is to have a relationship. Now, he was only there for 3 months, and he hoped to build something with her. But when the time was ending, she looked at him like, oh no, come on, but you know, this is just a summer thing. And that's his Saturn, I think, on the IC. He felt like betrayed a bit, and he felt like, at the same time, he felt super contained. He felt abandoned a bit, which is a kind of a Saturn on the IC experience. So then what we talked about also is if this is reflecting on something on his previous life, because in his natal chart, the moon is conjunct Saturn. So there might have been a similar experience, even though it was not on the IC, there might have been a similar experience with his mother or something. So we talked a little bit about that. But I think it's quite interesting that he had this experience in Tenerife. If we move forward in time, well, I'm not going to spend because I see I'm running out of time, and this is not so important. You see, Jupiter is here close to the ascendant. Sorry, Jupiter is here close to the ascendant. And if we go, when he went to Venice, of course, he was in his natural place, let's say, because the chart was being quite close to his natal chart. So he felt very in touch with his Jupiter. He became a leader in his group of students and all of that. I don't think it's so important here because it matches his natal chart, but it was just to show you the contrast when you move to a place to another. Now, in 2013, he converted to Islam. So he was born in Italy. So probably 99% of Italians, he was born into Catholicism. And then in 2013, he converted his faith to Islam. He has never been here, but when we looked at the astrocartography, we saw that Chiron on the midheaven goes right through Mecca. Because I asked him, what would you say, if you have to choose one place in the world, what would you say is the capital city of Islam? Because, you know, Islam is not one country. So it's like, what would you say is the one place that is the kind of the center of that? And he said Mecca. So I said, okay, let's look if there's something. And we found Chiron on the midheaven. And Chiron on the midheaven, I would say, okay, my wound is, I don't know what my role in society is. And I feel like after what we talked, I feel he started feeling that he understood what his role in society was after he did the conversion to Islam. And I think it's quite interesting that Chiron goes through Mecca. So it's it's the wound and also the healing balsam, the healing potion for his wounding to connect to this place. So again, you think, don't go to a Chiron place, to a Chiron land place, because you're going to feel your wound. Well, maybe you're going to heal your wound. He didn't go to Mecca, but it was by converting to Islam that he felt a lot of things about himself. He started accepting a lot of things about himself. So I think that's another thing interesting about astrocartography, that faraway places that we have never been may have an impact on us when we look at the astrocartography. And now I would like to, I have a few minutes, I would like to talk a little bit about the Parans. So far the idea is we look at the chart, we look at in which places at the moment where this person was born, those planets were active because they were conjunct an angle, and we believe that if somebody moves to that line, they're going to take that planet into the limelight. It's going to become prominent. They're going to give strength to that planet to express himself according to the original chart. Now, that's something, sometimes you will go to a place that it's very important and you will not see any line. And you will say, how is this possible? You know, I hate it when astrology fails on us. Like you look at the astrocartography and you say, how is it that there's no line? This was such an important place. So there's something you can also look, which is the Parans. And so what are these? So I need to go a little bit onto the astronomy, but just a tiny bit. So for the ones who like the astronomy, so that you understand what I'm talking about. Basically, the local meridian, right, is a circle that joins the north and south, and the nadir, the zenith and the nadir. Yes, this is wrong. The zenith is on top. I'm seeing now. Sorry, this drawing is wrong. The zenith is on top of our heads, and the nadir is underneath. I'm sorry. The horizon line is a circular line or small circle, right? Which is the place where the Earth and sky meets, right? So it conjoins all of the cardinal points. And then we have the ecliptic. We know the ecliptic is the place where, you know, the line on which the sun moves throughout the year, right? So the ascendant is the place where the ecliptic meets the horizon, and the midheaven and the IC are the places where the ecliptic meets this local meridian, this line, right? So from then on, if a planet is conjunct the ascendant, we say it's rising. If it's conjunct the midheaven, we say it's culminating. If it's conjunct the descendant, we say it's setting. And if it's conjunct the IC, we say maybe anti-culminating, or we say conjunct the IC, right? This is kind of, okay, we all know this. This is so far, okay. Now, what are the Parans? Again, Robert Hunt, he says, whatever the detailed truth may be, it is clear that planets have a fourfold rhythm of intensity. We said this. They rise, they culminate, they set, and they anti-culminate, right? What he says is that what happens when two planets are doing this, when two planets are conjunct and angled at the same time? He says, well, if these two planets are at the peak, probably their forces get combinated. And that's what we call a Paran. So a Paran is when you have two planets or more, but you have at least two planets that are angular at the same time. It doesn't have to be the same angle, but it has to be angular at the same time. So we have, for instance, here, this is a Paran, Sun on the east, and let's say this is Venus on the midheaven. This is a Paran, Sun on the east and Venus on the descendant. This is another Paran, Sun on the midheaven and Venus on the descendant. Okay, when two planets are angular. Now, okay, this will be another Paran. So you have more examples. Sun on the IC, Venus on the descendant. So, because the Earth rotates on its axis 24/7, what it is believed is that where the line crosses, you have the Paran, but that whole line, that whole latitude will be activating the Paran for 24 hours, okay? So it's not just the place. So here, for instance, we see here is the Pluto line, and here is the Sun line, and they cross here. So here's the Paran, right? This means that here, the Sun was on the ascendant at the same time that Pluto was on the descendant. Here's the Paran. Now we believe that this Paran is active through the whole latitude line, and not only in that point. And this is because the Earth will do 24 hours. In 24 hours, it will cross that point. So if we look at Giovanni's chart again, in Granada, we have a Paran, which is the Sun-Pluto Paran. And here he was working as a volunteer. This was before he turned into Islam. He was working as a volunteer for an Islamic cultural center. And he had this experience where the place burned, he was sleeping and the place burned down, and he woke up, the place was filled of smoke, and he felt he was going to die. And he felt somebody pick him up and taking him out of the place and saving his life. And that's when he decided to change his faith to the Islam. What's interesting is that he was in Granada, and the experience he has is a Sun-Pluto experience, which is a death and rebirth, right? And he felt, this is how he described it. He felt that he was dying and somebody saved him and he was taken back to life. He felt, this is what he said, that he felt that somebody grabbed him and he took him out. And he says, I know it's impossible because I was alone. It was not in the city of Granada, it was outside, a lost house. So I know nobody came, but that's how I felt. So you can also look at the Parans, because if you look at the astrocartographies of Giovanni, there's no line in Granada. And after he told me this, I was like, there has to be something, because this was a life-changing experience, so there has to be something. And I found the Paran. Okay, these are the techniques that basically I wanted to share to kind of wrap up, because I think it's time, yes. I wanted to close with this quote. Whatever is true of space and time, this much is true for place. We are immersed in it and could not do without it. To be at all, to exist in any way, is to be somewhere. And to be somewhere is to be in some kind of place. Place is as requisite as the air we breathe, the ground on which we stand, the bodies we have. We are surrounded by places. We walk over and through them. We live in places, relate to others in them, and die in them. Nothing we do is unplaced. How could it be otherwise? How could we fail to recognize these primal facts? And this is how I feel about places. So thank you very much for bearing with my ideas so far for 1 hour.